When I became a software engineer, at the time I was real excited. I was finally out of school. I had studied for many, many years, done a lot of personal projects, and was ready to start my first job in corporate environment. And as I went through the interview process, I got offered my first job as a software developer one. And I went and accepted the position. And my first day, I can remember, being all excited and being ready to actually get paid to write code finally and work on, what I thought would be something really cool and meet other people who were doing what I, had wanted to be doing for years. And I remember walking into that first office room and just kind of being shocked at what I saw. What I mean by that is that this office room in particular had no windows. It was a closed room. There were four other devs working in there in kind of these like stand up desks kind of next to each other and all kind of crammed in this one room because the office was too small for the number of people that were being added to the company at the time. And this was where I was going to be working for 8 hours of the day, and this was my new world after school. My excitement got me through the first few weeks, and after the first few weeks, I kind of started to have a little bit of change of heart, to be honest. I was really looking around at my surroundings and really questioning, is this where I want to be for all those 8 hours? And I started to, listen to videos and as I worked talking about, being outside in nature and, experiencing all the world has to offer outside of screens. And that really started to grow on me. And something deep down in me I just felt bothered by my surroundings. Being in that room, just, you can't, not being able to see the outside really affected me. So I started to go on walks, and I would walk down to a nearby river and walk alongside of it and really just think. And it was at that time that I started to question my decision to become a software developer in the first place. Now, this lasted for many months, and I was going through really a process of I had a lot of just inner turmoil. I mean, within me, I was just going through like this state of like, I've been studying for years to do this. Now I'm doing it, and I don't know if I like it. So I would, return back after my walk by the river, and I would come up to the office, and I would sit back down at my desk and just sit there and stare at the screen. And I thought that, is this it? Is this all there is? I was at college with all my friends, surrounded by so many fun things to do. I had all these people around me that you could hang out with, and it was a great experience. And now you're stuck sitting in an open office behind a screen. And then you drive home in traffic, and you get home, and that's it. This impacted me. This had a profound impact on me. I was really just disturbed by this at my core, and I didn't know what to do. I was really shaken up about it. I didn't really do anything about it. Some people might actually act on that feeling and switch jobs. I didn't do that. I stayed at that job for 4 years, I think 4.5 years. But it was during that first year I really noticed strange things happening to the way I thought and to the way I approach software engineering as a whole. When I started to have all that inner conflict about being behind a screen, it really made me concerned greatly for the state of the world and the future generation, because I wanted to be outside, naturally, as a lot of people do, but yet I found myself behind a screen for 8 hours a day, working on something that's, very abstract and artificial and immaterial. I didn't know what to do with this. I wrestled with this for a while because, this is how I was making a living, right? This is how I'm providing, providing for myself, and at the time um, my wife, and this is how I'm making my way in the world. And I really struggled with this, and I really wrestled with, do I want to be behind a screen for this long? Um, and I started to explore alternatives, and I started to consider doing woodworking, doing some kind of, being a mechanic or things like that. Things that I like doing on the side after my job. And strongly, strongly is, I think, putting it lightly, I was convinced that I was going to do woodworking full time, as much as anyone could be convinced to do something. And I started to make things and sell them on the side, and I made, I think, $600 or $700 in a few months. And I asked myself, could I really do this? And I made a spreadsheet, and I figured out all the numbers and how much of stuff I would need to sell and how long it would take me roughly, and I calculated every cost, and I just couldn't make it work. I couldn't square the numbers. And I couldn't get even close to what I was making at the time. So I kind of forfeited the idea. Looking back on it, I don't regret that, because I think it would have been a poor decision to jump into something with that level of uncertainty in the stage of life I was at. Um, and then something strange happened. It's almost like I became convinced that screens were bad. But it was around this time that I actually switched to a dumb phone from my smartphone. And it was really around this time that I became increasingly convinced that screens and smartphones were very bad. And I switched to a dumb phone for, I think, 3 or 4 months. And what I learned in those 3 or 4 months, I learned some pretty interesting things. I learned, one, that I was highly dependent on my smartphone for just about everything. And I almost felt that if I went somewhere without my smartphone, like I was forgetting a part of myself, and I didn't like how that made me feel. I also realized that I was highly anxious without my smartphone, and I also realized that I, I didn't even consider the number of times I was checking my phone. Like, you just pull it out of your pocket and swipe up and see notifications and whatever else. But you can't do that with a dumb phone, right? There's nothing really to check. You get texts and maybe a missed call or two, but that's all you can do. And so I stopped checking my phone, and it almost felt like I was given more time back in my day, but I didn't know what to do with it, if that makes sense. And I felt largely uncomfortable in social situations where normally I would just, pull my phone out and scroll through email or something. Now I didn't have that option, so I didn't pull my phone out. So I just sat there and looked around at people, and it made me think back to a time when you could ride your bike to your friend's house. When you're a kid, you knock on their door, ring the doorbell. You know, somebody answers, their parent answers, mom answers. You ask, "Hey, is so and so here, my friend here?" And they say, "No, they're not here." And then you ride home, and that's it. And if they were there, then your friend would come out, and you guys would ride bikes, and you go and have a fun time. And I fear that we're past that point now in society. And when I went back to a dumb phone, it's like I kind of recaptured some of that a little bit, some of the more face-to-face interactions with people outside of screens. Because now the expectation is that when you text somebody, they're going to text you back immediately. And we're getting to a point where if they don't text you back, then something's wrong. Something's wrong with them. They're ignoring you. They didn't used to be true before smartphones, for the most part. Now, obviously, you could still ignore, one of your friends. You go out back, and they're at the front door, and you kind of skip out of them, and you don't see them, right? But that's hard to do with screens now, and how interconnected we are just with phones and everything. So strange things happened when I got rid of my smartphone. And unfortunately, I had to return to my smartphone for really one reason, and one reason only, is because that my security authentication app to log into work required that I have the required that I have this like sign in application. It was like a two-factor authentication that I had to click on my phone to grant me access to the VPN at work. So I couldn't get around that. I had to return back and use that to sign me in. Now, I have the same thing for, we have two-factor authentication for a lot of accounts, and that's kind of like becoming the security standard of the day. It would be hard to go back to a dumb phone because some of those rely on applications and not text. And I found the text to be unreliable sometimes. I noticed that I was missing texts and missing calls. Now that admittedly might be due to poor service or poor phone, but I think I just got one of like a newer Nokia phone, so I thought it was pretty good. But that was a strange thing I noticed happen. And honestly, it really kind of clued me into the state of where we're at in terms of screens and how interconnected we all are. So again, like I said, I had to return back to the smartphone, and I've been using a smartphone ever since. I have considered returning back to a dumb phone as my personal phone when I go out places, and then keeping my smartphone as a way to continue to sign in and use whatever apps I need, but then just not use like the texting and calling functionality of that. The problem is that now with iMessage, it comes on your MacBook, right? So now I would still get it on my MacBook, and it would just make things complicated because I'd have to cancel iMessage and then have it go to my phone now as a text message. And sometimes switching between that is a little iffy at best. So I'm not really sure. But that's a strange thing I noticed happened to me. Now, that lasted for about a year. I noticed about a year and a half in, I still had those feelings that I talked about before largely, but I started to notice myself kind of getting out of that a little bit. It's almost like I was getting over this wall. And about year two, I finally felt like I got over that wall and I allowed myself to progress as a developer, progress as in this career and actually improve. And I felt like my mentality towards the job itself improved as well. But it took years, and I don't want to discount. I'm not. I don't want to discount the actual inner turmoil that I did feel in the beginning, starting out software engineering. And it took me again. I really do believe that I had to get over this wall after two. It was at least 2 years. It might have been longer, but it was hard. It was a hard internal journey to navigate. And looking back on it, had I been maybe in a different place, I maybe would have considered acting on those feelings to do woodworking or to do something, but I didn't. And I think I think I'm still trying to figure that out, but getting over the wall is important. And for me, it took years. So if you're feeling like you don't want to do software engineering, maybe just give it a chance, see if you can get over that wall. And then once you kind of get over the wall, see if you can keep going a little bit. It's kind of like running. It's like you feel like you can't run anymore, but then once you get past that feeling, you can run some more. So maybe that's what it is. So maybe give that a chance. That's what it was for me. Now I still encounter that wall sometimes, and I still have feelings, of fear associated with the job, but it's not as often. And I think that that's encouraging to me. So hopefully this made sense. Let me know what your thoughts are about this and if you've encountered the wall in your own career as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.